right. Hello, good afternoon, good evening, good night, goodbye. Hey, happy Monday. Thanks for being here. I am scrambling a little bit. I was behind trying to make preparations for this. I don't even know why I'm trying to do this, but I was trying to kind of set up a camera to get some kind of overhead views, and I was still monkeying with it, and I noticed, oh, geez, the timer's running down. This might be bad. So apologies if you see me kind of scrambling a little bit to make this work. Hope everyone had a great weekend. I was at PAX over the weekend. It was, oops, I'm a little bit zoomed in there more than I want to be. I kind of like to not show my window. There we go. I was at PAX over the weekend. It was a very, I want to say kind of ad hoc, thrown together at the last minute. It was something that came up. Well, obviously, I'd been at PAX Unplugged. If you follow the channel, you might have seen my me talking about it. Hold on one second. I'm trying to plug something in here. Oh gosh, that's kind of a tight squeeze. See how that works. I was at. I'd gone to PAX Unplugged. I enjoyed it, so, and it gave me. And I guess this is how things work. Let me bottom line. So last year, just kind of on a lark, I said, let me try to get a press pass to Gen Con. And they actually gave it to me. Now, I didn't get to go to Gen Con, but I think, I don't know this, but I think that having gotten that press pass, Dungeon Master Masterclasses, we don't need no fancy setup, camera setups. Well, you might not get it, but I'm trying. I'm trying for you. I'm trying for you. Let's see if I can do this. Go to switch the camera. Now, if I see my mouse, hold on a second. Let's see, does this work? Oh, you're getting it. Ooh. But it's giving me like the exact view. Can I just do, if I go to like something interesting, I don't know how to get it to just not having my phone and everything on there. And it's showing me kind of upside down. See, I could probably figure that out. All right, we're working here, folks. We're working for you. I'm using my phone because it's handy. And, whoops. That's my wife and her Halloween costume. Probably not going to appreciate that showing up on stream, but I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm still working on this. I will have it, I think, have it set in a minute. So I did the Gen Con thing, got the press pass, didn't get to go to Gen Con, but it kind of opened the door, I think, for me to at least consider or attempt maybe to get press passes for other things. So the next thing that was up on my list was when PAX Unplugged came along. I said, let me try, and I got it, and I went and I talked about that. Now, when PAX East came up, I went ahead and just applied for the press pass, not knowing what I would be able to do, not knowing if I'd be able to go, and just not really even looking at the dates. I just said, let me just put in for the press pass, see what I get it. And if I get it, maybe I can make it work. If I can't, I won't. I have a cousin who lives in the Boston area. I thought, well, maybe I'll be able to do something with him. He's kind of a board game fan, or sort of, he's more on the beginnings of his board game journey than I am, but he likes board games. Maybe he'd get a kick out of it. His partner, she likes video games and board games too. So I thought, man, maybe that'll be something we can do together. And if I can't go, then whatever. Well, I had family coming in from overseas for a long trip, and this PAX is coming in right in there, like kind of last week, staying with us. So there's a lot of things going on, and I kept kind of saying to myself, to my cousin, like, I don't know if I'm going to do this. I don't know if I'm going to make it. I'm going to try to go. If I can't, I can't. I don't know when I'm going to be able to go, which days. I don't know anything. So it was really kind of an ad hoc trip. I wasn't really planning to do much in terms of, like, I don't know, networking or things like that. I was gonna go kind of see who was there. I was definitely more interested in the tabletop stuff, obviously, than the video game stuff. I thought I'll go see. So I did do a couple of panels, which I'll get into. I thought they were interesting. Dungeon Master Masterclass. I have not been to a lot of conventions. PAX Unplugged was my first kind of gaming convention, just in the broad sense. It's not just a table, it's just not a role-playing game convention, but just a gaming convention. I'd been to New York Comic-Con a couple of times. And that's pretty much been my experience. So I am definitely a noob at all of this. Definitely noob at all this stuff. So, um, I don't have a lot of expert advice. It's kind of just me muddling around. I went to a couple of the panels. I did get to demo a board game, and I'll get into that one because that was kind of it was I like the game and I like the story. I think the thing is that you get to see at these conventions is you get to talk to the people who are involved with games. And this is true if you're at a role playing game convention, or in this case, if you're at the tabletop area at PAX East, you really get to talk to people who might be involved, depending on the publisher. Obviously, some like I didn't get to. I saw Free League was there, but I didn't see who was there. I'm not sure that those were any of the authors of the Free League stuff. They might have just been. Maybe they were volunteers. I don't know. Maybe they work for Free League, but obviously a lot of those guys are in Europe. Maybe I didn't get to talk to them, so I'm not sure who those guys were. But you could talk to a lot of people who are intimately involved with the game, so you can really have a conversation about the design, about like, well, how are they doing this? About maybe even just wow, like congrats for getting this out there, right? Or just get a sense of kind of what it's like to go through the process of building these stuff out, and that's what I found really fascinating. And I got to talk to a couple of people around this one game. I think it was called. They were the ones that sent these. All right, let me try to get this again. They sent these. Let's see, hold on. Oh, it didn't go. Oh, oops, wrong screen. There we go. Ooh. And I'll turn this sideways so I can maybe get the better. They were giving these out. They're like, hey, if you give us a shout out on Instagram, we'll give you a couple of minutes. We'll give you a couple of these pieces. And of course, I said, well, not that I have a lot of anything really going on Instagram. I guess it's just gonna stay. All right, I'm just gonna leave it like that. You can see my messy desk. All right. You can see. You can give these. So that was kind of fun. Unrelated, I got these 1985 games, these extra inserts for the deck of stories in the mail they had sent. The panels I went to were interesting. I always like to go. I enjoy the panels. I try to see panels of stuff that they did have some tabletop related ones. The first one I went to was video game related, but it definitely had some overlap with role playing games. So that was interesting. The second one was a role playing game specific panel. And if you're wondering, I don't know if you've ever seen videos from any of the Comic Cons or anything. The panels are basically they get I haven't seen it with just one person. Presumably they could do a one person panel, but usually it's a number of people, at the front of a stage, and they'll talk about topics. Sometimes there's an MC or facilitator. Sometimes there's not. And they have some kind of theme. There's a topic, obviously, that you look and sign up, or not sign up for, but you look and decide to go attend. And then usually at the end, they do Q&A, that kind of thing. Let's see. Nothing says, I'm always looking for historical minis. They go well in low fantasy campaigns. Yeah, these are kind of cool. One of them is Brutus, and the other one is Mark Antony. Let me reach over. See my organization skills on point, because I took notes on the panels that I attended, so I figure I could use them to refresh my memory. In general, so I'll say this about the convention. The convention hall in Boston, it's I think it's called the Boston South Ball. I don't know. Boston Expo Center, something of that nature. It's a really nice convention center. It must have a new design. I've been to the big convention center in New York and Manhattan. It's called the Javits Center. It's a massive complex, a massive big edifice, but it feels dated in terms of its design and the way it's laid out. This one in Boston, it's by the waterfront. It's again a big building, but they did some things in terms of the design that made it seem just a lot more modern, kind of open, airy. It was very vertical. And they had windows kind of along the top. You couldn't see the sun out, but you got sunlight in, which I felt gave it a really nice touch. I remember talking to multiple people, and then also my own feelings included about how it just feels nice to get some natural sunlight. You just don't feel like you're in a basement, or in some kind of cavern or cave for however many hours that you're there. It feels just feels nice. And I also think that extra verticality, not that other conventions are necessarily feel oppressively, low ceiling, but just having that just space. I think it just makes you feel. I think it does kind of add to just giving you feeling a little bit of movement. Now, I don't know how many people were there. The place didn't seem super crowded. The COVID protocols were in effect. You had to get they had a wristband that you would get when you show your vaccine information, and I think you had to be vaccinated. The mask mandate and was in effect, and everyone was masked up, and I didn't see anybody having any issues. Uh, that all seemed to go without a hitch. It didn't feel super crowded, but I don't know. It's hard to tell sometimes with the amount of people that are in a place, especially when you have sort of the main area, which is big, and then you have all these side areas. And it's hard to tell, where everybody is. I don't know what the head count is for how many people attended, or whether that's the first time I've been there, so I don't know whether it's high or low, whatever. But it seemed like a good amount of people, not too much. The main area was on video games, mostly PC. It felt like mostly PC stuff. They did have console areas. My cousin played Steel Battalion, and I don't know if you remember that, but it's like a 20-year-old game that came out. And the neat thing with Steel Battalion at the time was it had its own. You basically had to buy this whole kit, including pedals and this whole dashboard with two joysticks. It was like you had a mini airplane cockpit that you had to play with, and all the buttons and dials, of which they had many, all worked. But it meant that the game was, $400, and you needed all this stuff to play it. And I don't remember what happened ultimately with the game or the publisher or whatever, but the largest collection of these still working Steel Battalion games was all in one room, all synced up to a LAN, and they were hosting these basically 10-minute kind of demo walkthroughs. You get a chance to play it. My cousin did that a couple times. He enjoyed it. It was neat to see it, because I think the thing is, it does feel cool when you see these guys. It just feel like you're really piloting a mech, because you're not just using a little joystick. You have these two big, looks like the kind of joysticks you would see in the cockpit of a plane, and you're hitting these flips and dials, and you're moving, and the thing's kind of clunky, and you're using the pedals. Pretty cool stuff. But it was mostly the PC gaming, some console stuff, and then also some tabletop stuff on the other side. I mostly stayed to the tabletop stuff. I don't know, I like video games, but I don't know, I wasn't into. I don't know, I just didn't feel like it, and I felt like I didn't know the time I was there, and I wasn't there all that much. I kind of wanted to spend in the tabletop areas, and then I did a couple of panels. So the first panel I went to was one, and I forget the exact title, but essentially it was. I really like these panels that get into the kind of diversity questions. I think that's particularly for the OSR, I think that's a real issue for people. And I'll get into, there's some interesting stuff OSR wise that I kind of gleaned from this a little bit, or we can talk about it. This was more focused on kind of the sort of Black, also LGBT kind of experience in gaming. But I think they were talking specifically about video games. That was kind of the theme of the panel, was kind of that sort of, blackness, LGBTQ kind of sort of I don't know if awareness is the right word, kind of, or just that kind of in video games. But I think a lot of the stuff's applicable to tabletop role playing games, and certainly to the kind of OSR. Hey, the Dave says he used to hit PAX PAX West every year back when it was the only PAX. It was a different experience back then than it is now. I bet. I think everything gets more kind of commercialized and less personal. I mean, I have a Penny Arcade comic book that I remember that the two guys, was it Jerry Holkins and I forget the other guy's name, signed for me way back at New York Comic Con. I think this is I don't know if it was pre-PAX, but it seems like ever ago now. But I mean, I don't remember if they were even there doing anything at PAX East. I don't know if they had a Acquisitions Incorporated gaming session. Do they even still run those? I'll have to check YouTube excuse me, to see later on if they even run them anymore. But yeah, I'm sure it's gotten big and less personal and all that stuff. So anyway, so this panel, and one of the things they asked and it was kind of MC, there was someone of a facilitator, not really a true MC, but kind of a facilitator, would ask questions. I think one of them was, asking them, hey, what's the first, black characters? They were all the panel members are black. What's the first black character that you remember, in gaming? And those are really interesting, because it's them thinking about these games. And what strikes me from an OSR kind of RPG thing is I think in what you don't necessarily see it if you don't have to deal with it, you don't see it, which is this idea of seeing people like you in the games. And maybe in a tabletop sense, you might even push that out to seeing people like you playing the games, and what that makes you feel like. And when they were talking about what it felt like to see black characters, good black characters in games, that was powerful for them. And it kind of speaks to when you have to go back and you see how recent it is. There might have been a kind of positive black characters that they could kind of find to play. You kind of feel like, oh, that stinks. I feel for you, that you didn't have these kinds of role models really in these avatars that really fit for games. And you can really, I think often that gets minimized when people talk about a lot of things, a lot of these issues, is that it really is important to people to see people like themselves in positive lights in games. It's not just kind of a lip service thing. And you can, if you've never had to deal with that, then you can just kind of go, oh, pshaw, what does it matter? Whatever. But it matters. It does matter when you hear and see these people talk about it. You can see that it mattered to them when they were finding these characters, and I think that's certainly something that can apply in tabletop gaming. I know, when you walk into a store and it's all filled with a certain kind of person, that's going to make some people feel right at home. These are my people, and it's going to make other people maybe feel uncomfortable. Like I don't know, if these are my people or not. I don't see anybody who's kind of like me. So what do you do? What do you do with that? And how do you try to do better, right? And how can you try to make it? And that was really the kind of the themes of this talk, was kind of trying to make play the kind of idea of the sort of, and I feel like when you use these terms, they just get people like to just like make fun of them and kind of blow them out. But that kind of idea of a safe space, or maybe just say, a place that you feel comfortable, a place that you feel welcome as an individual to come play. And these folks, or a lot of them they were all black, or I think, black or people of color. I think they were all LGBTQ. And so they had these things of like, where can I find a space that I can really just be free, bring my full self? I don't need to hide the fact that I might be gay. I don't need to hide the fact that I'm a person of color. I don't need to act a certain way. Like, I can really kind of be myself, and how that's important for them. And again, they were talking in terms of video games, but it certainly resonated with me in that tabletop space of, like, how can we do better with this, right? Because I don't think we often do enough. Let's see. The Dave says, in a lot of games, even now, black characters are just the white models with brown skin. It is a problem. Yes, I would agree with that. And the Dave also says that they made a point to represent in the Trade Winds book. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of ways to address it, and probably there's good ways and bad ways. And I think we have a tendency to brush it aside, or not think about it, or just say like, well, you can, like in a role playing, well, you can play whatever you want. It's like, yeah, but that I got to get past. That's like, you figure that out once you're kind of in the door. If people aren't getting through the door to see that part, then it doesn't matter. You got to make it so that people want to come in that front door. Then once they're in the front door, you can say, hey, be whatever you want to do, all that kind of good stuff. They talked about the stigmas of kind of about games and lack of black representation. Like these folks they all run. There was one that was NYC Gay Gamers, but Gay Gamers, GAYMERS, and it's not necessarily that you have to be gay to be part of it, but that is part of their focus. But it's really just everybody belongs. And they're talking how they're going, that they're, that's a nonprofit, and they're different companies reach out to them, video games folks and things, and they do stuff with tabletop as well. And that they would, they would come on these questions like, well, I didn't know black people played video games. And it's kind of like, what? Like, what are you talking about, right? But there's this stigma, this myth out there that like, well, black people don't play video games. And I'm sure that people probably think, well, just like people would say things, girls don't play role-playing games, or black people don't play role-playing games, like this kind of thing that you have to overcome, where people just have in their mind that it's not, that somehow that there's some kind of racial, just racial barrier to people playing games. Like, hey, everybody plays games. Everybody wants to play games. And if they're not playing the games, it's probably not because they don't want to. It's probably because of these other points, that they're looking at places that say like, yeah, these people are not friendly to me. I don't feel like safe and comfortable here, so I'm not going to go in. That kind of thing. The Griffin says, I didn't know black people made video games. It's like, excuse me, what? Right. But these are conversations that they really have. And they're having these conversations with people who are in authority at these companies, right? So there are these things that they're trying to convey. And it's like, hello, like why doesn't everybody play games? Like, yeah, right. But getting past that thing. But again, like they were talking specifically about video games, but I could totally see the same things being held by folks in the tabletop industry about different I'm sure there are people out there who have misconceptions or some kind of over generalization of certain ethnic groups or certain people and tabletop games or role playing games, whatever it is, right? I guarantee that if you went and got to some of them, but they're trying to work beyond that. They're trying to show everybody that. I like one of the I like one of the quotes that one of the speakers said. They said, "Hey, just because you call it a safe space doesn't make it safe." Right? It's like just because you say, "Hey, we're welcoming," it's not just what you say, right? People are going to look at what you do, the vibe that's out there, everything that's going on. So it's not enough just to say like, "Hey, you're welcome to come." And I've seen that. And look, this one that's come up. I've gone in some discords. People invited me, nice, and I get in there, and yeah, they welcome me. And then I see what's going on in there, and then I quickly hit the exit button. I'm like, yeah, this place is not for me. Like you could say, "Oh, we're welcome," but I see some of the behavior going on in there, and that seems to be tacitly approved or explicitly approved by the folks running the place, and I'm like, yeah, this is not my space, right? So I just did my own thing. I totally get that. You can say whatever you want, but if people get in there, right, you put the signs on the door saying, "Hey, all is welcome," and so someone comes in that front door, takes a look around, and if you're not walking the walk, then talking the talk, isn't enough. Some interesting things because someone did actually ask a question about role playing games in terms of trying to make places welcoming for everyone. And one of the big points was, hey, never undervalue that session zero. Session zero is a big thing. Set all your boundaries, set your expectations. If you really want to make it a place that's welcome for everybody, this is where you're going to lay all those ground rules down. So if you need more reasons to run session zero in your games, they have more. And avoid tokenizing was something that they also mentioned. Avoid just having those kind of token characters like the Dave mentioned before, just taking something and putting a fresh coat of paint on it and saying, "There, see, I've done it. You're here, right? Woo!" Not enough, right? Not good enough. Oval Team Patrol says, "My own tables have been very diverse, though more men in general. Did have one group where the dudes were outnumbered, but that's probably uncommon. That's been uncommon in my experience as well. And I think when you hear a lot of stories from women who post in Reddit and things like that, there's just a lot of there's a lot of ways that sometimes some folks, some of the fellows can kind of make things uncomfortable for women at the table, which is probably I'm sure you could do I could have a whole other panel on that aspect of it, and it wasn't their focus, but like I said, I was hearing a lot of the stuff they were saying, and I thought, oh, this stuff is really, it's not just if you're trying to make it welcoming for these particular groups, like really this stuff is, and not just for video games, like this stuff really can apply to everybody. So I thought it was a really good panel. I love hearing these different perspectives. I'm always wondering, kind of how can I don't know. I'm not running any kind of public games, and I'm thinking about maybe the next con or the con after that. Maybe I'll try to run a game. Uh, they're always looking for GMs. I don't know if these cons offer things for GMs, any kind of perks if you run games, but they're always looking for GMs to run games. So maybe I'll do something. But I just think about things like, yeah, these things really, there's really a lot here that I found applicable. So it was a really good talk, and it was pretty well attended also, which I always appreciate. Sometimes I've gone to a couple ones. I thought these really great talks about really interesting, I feel like important topics in these spaces, and then you see that they're just poorly attended. And I get it, everyone's there to play games and to do all that kind of fun stuff, and here's this kind of serious, kind of maybe even a downer topic, and maybe it's one that, depending on your perception, who you are, who you believe you are, might hit you wrongly. But I think it's kind of important, so I always like to try to find at least a couple of them in my limited con experience. A couple of them I want to go and kind of see. So that was the first one. It was really good. I meant to get a pamphlet from NYC Gamers because they had one apparently that was specifically for tabletop. I didn't get over there. I couldn't find their groups I couldn't find their booth. So I'm not sure where that is. Maybe I'll reach out to them. I mean, they're local here. Maybe I'll even try to get someone on the stream. It might be really interesting to talk about, because I think that's the other thing. And I don't know. I mean, I talked to Alyssa. If you haven't watched some of the Alyssa chats, we did the last one we did earlier last week was about Chaosium Con, but the one before that, and I might pull it out as an excerpt, post it separately. She did a talk about kind of this kind of similar thing, And that was kind of it was at GaryCon. I think it was, yeah, it was at GaryCon. So really at a really OSR kind of focused gaming convention, which is good because I think a lot of this stuff doesn't necessarily filter down to the OSR part of tabletop role playing. I'm not sure. I just get that sense. Let's see. The Dave says, offering something to GMs for running games at a con sounds like a great idea. Some type of GM specific swag. They ran playtests at PAX West years ago. It taught them a lot. I want to say I've heard that they do, but I haven't seen it because I don't know if it's something where if you register in advance, maybe you do. I've heard some do. I know that Alyssa, when she's talking about Chaosium Con, thought that maybe they should have done more to kind of promote and encourage people to GM. And hold on, I'm going to open up a soda here. So sorry about that. But this is, what is this we got here today? This is a new discovery, Spindrift Discovery. This is Blood Orange Tangerine for the working man. And if anyone at Spindrift wants to sponsor me, reach out because I drink a lot of your product these days. Yeah, so I think in the OSR spaces, I feel like the stuff kind of gets filtered out. I don't know if it's just kind of the because we're kind of on the outside, or I don't know, a lot of stuff just gets focused on the modern game. But I feel like OSR kind of this stuff doesn't necessarily filter down. So Alyssa did that GaryCon. This was here. This one, I don't know how many folks in there besides me were kind of OSR centric game players, but at least there was at least one other person who asked a question in tabletop gaming. So that was the first panel. I'll just cover both panels back to back, even though I didn't see them. I didn't go listen to them, watch them contiguously in time. The second one was about role-playing games with kids, which is a topic that's near and dear to my heart because I'm trying to figure out how to. My daughter's 8, and she's shown some interest in this stuff, so I want to kind of do that with her, but I don't know. Yeah, I could definitely use some guidance in that regard. I've never dealt with kids in this and playing games with that before. When I was playing back in the day, it was with other kids. There was no kind of adults present, so I don't really have that experience. I think technically the panel was called Tabletop Role Playing Games and Social Emotional Learning, but the focus was on kids. But I also felt like, just like in the other panel, even though this one was supposed to be about kids, a lot of it was applicable, I think, to stuff you could do with adults. Dungeon Master Masterclass says, every person I trust that talks about an RPG convention says the con needs more DMs. Yep, they always do. They always got some kind of sheet. Or I say always, the couple I've been to so far, and from what I've heard from other people, yeah, there always is a sheet saying out there by the kind of pickup gaming spot saying, hey, GMs, please come and run games. Yeah, so if you're into running games, I think you can instantly pretty much get folks. I mean, who knows? You might have some. I mean, maybe it's depending on the systems. Yeah, obviously, people are super into D&D. If you're playing something else, maybe not so much. So I played in a game, and I'll talk about it in a little bit. I played in the one game I played in was kind of a it was sort of in that kind of what's that, like a kingdom or a microcosm type game, kind of a collaborative. This was sort of a collaborative kind of build a place, GM-less kind of game, and it was called The Ground Itself. And there were, including the person who organized the game, there were 6 of us. So a game that seemed to me I had no idea what it was. And in fact, the person who organized the game literally left the rule book at the desk so that you could look at the rule book to kind of get an idea of what the game was. But it filled up. So it's maybe really people are going to play kind of anything. The folks at that table kind of, or at least one other person at the table seemed to, or 2 of them seemed to kind of have some knowledge of that game, which kind of blew my mind. It seems like a very niche game, but there you go. Let's see. The Dave says, started playing with their niece and nephew when they were really young. Just set up a table somewhere and people will show. I had a line of players when I was play testing game years ago. Yeah, I think a lot of people are always interested in playing games, and there never seems to be enough people running games. So if you run a game, if you build it, they will come. If you run it, they will come. So I guess the high points, or the points I took note of on this particular panel, social and tabletop role-playing games and social emotional learning. You have to be mindful. And these were all educators who also run games in various ones. One of them was educator at a school who ran an after school program D&D for I think eighth graders, or maybe might even younger than eighth graders, fifth graders, eighth graders, somewhere in that middle school range, maybe 5 to 8th grade. I'm not sure. There was another group that I think is they run games. I don't know if it's an after school program, but also for kids. These are all people who had educational backgrounds, either were educators directly, had educational backgrounds, and that were running games. So folks who kind of know what they're talking about and have the practical experience also. So they said about, being mindful, show acceptance, make an effort to pay attention to the kids, right? All kids are different, so you have to kind of embrace those differences and recognize those differences. Don't expect every kid to be the same. And that, of course, struck me as something that certainly makes sense in terms of adults. In the same way, when you come into a group, certainly if you're playing at a store somewhere else where you have, or at a con, or anywhere where you don't have necessarily a bunch of control over who's coming to your game, you got to be open to kind of give people a read, and kind of, try to accept them for kind of who they are, and just allow them to be, because everybody's different. Everybody's going to have different strengths. I think this is exaggerated with kids, though maybe with some adults, probably not, right? But that, I felt like, yeah, that's something that is appropriate, whether you're jamming kids or you're jamming adults. They do mention that for kids, a lot of the role playing that they might do is kind of discovering identities, playing out different things. So there's some latitude there. I think that also could apply to adults. A lot of adults, I think, maybe go into role playing, and maybe they're working out things within that they will then kind of, sort of publish in their role playing. Not publish is the wrong word, but will manifest in their role playing, and just to be aware of that. And with kids, they're certainly doing this. This is this time in their life where they are kind of developing. They are figuring out who they are. They may want to try things out. They're able to do it in a space that is kind of safe for them, right? They can do things like hit on girls. If you're a boy, right, you can go and try to flirt with a girl in the role-playing game you wouldn't dream of doing that. You might be too nervous to do it in real life, but in the game you could do that. So maybe you do that, and maybe you don't handle it, or you're a little bit overboard, or whatever it is. But hey, this is the GM, recognize that this is what the kids are doing. So, be appropriate. The Dave says that they sanitized their game world for their niece and nephew when they started playing to keep it PG, but they didn't know they can run a game as gritty and dark as they did before they started playing now. Yeah. Yep. I think that's another thing they came up with, is like, know your audience, know your kids. If you have kids who are into certain things and not into other things, and just, keep it in their age level and kind of where they are. One I thought was an important point is someone said, hey, role-playing games, can be therapeutic, but they're not therapy. Right. You can find a lot of mental benefits to playing role-playing games, but your job as a GM is not to be someone's therapist. And I think that could really be a helpful piece of advice, because I think we find that can often come up with games with adults, with kids, and it can feel like that you as a GM are being set up to sort of help somebody help someone with some psychological work, and that's not your job. Right. If they find solace in the gaming, great, but the game is not their therapy. They shouldn't walk into it expecting therapy out of it. And you should not be in the GM seat starting to give out therapy, or turning it into therapy. That's not what it is. Right. So I thought that was a really good point to bring up, because I think that happens a lot. Like, kind of like that kind of bartender becoming someone's therapist. You're the bartender. Hey, you're the GM. You're not a therapist. So keep that separation. They mentioned session 0 again, and not only that, but repeating it. Keep coming back to resetting expectations, making sure everyone's on the same page, that sort of stuff. So more just people talking about. I think we've seen this in a lot of over and over again from different people, including myself. Right, how important session 0 is. Their thing was just, you got to keep doing it. You keep having session 0, have a session 1.5, have a session 2.5. All this is just keep. I think with kids, it's especially important because of attention spans and changes and all that stuff. But again, with adults, I think it's also important to keep resetting expectations. Make sure everyone's still on the same page. Make sure you're on the same page with what you thought you wanted in session 0. Make sure all the players are on the same page. All that good stuff. Part of that session 0 and these repeated session 0s, set up the norms and expectations. If the game isn't fun, ask why isn't it fun, right? Don't just say, well, if someone says, yeah, I think, they were talking more like kids might say, well, it's not fun, right? But even as an adult, you might think, hey, the game's not fun. The game's not fun for me. Or the player might, as a player, you might think the game's not fun for me. Or maybe one of your players tells you this game's not fun. Instead of just kind of sitting with that, try to find out, well, what about it isn't fun? Like why isn't it fun? Try to drill in there a little bit, whether it's your own feeling or if you can talk to some other the person who's having that feeling. Why isn't it fun? Like what's going on there? Um, in terms of kids, and I think certainly with kids and even with adults, the GM tends to be that kind of facilitator figure, and as part of that, I said before, the differentiation. Yeah, all these kids and adults, all these people, right? They're individuals. They're gonna have different skills, values, emotions. They don't have to follow the same track. What you want is everybody contributing the experience. If they contribute, but as long as they contribute something in their own way, kind of let them be. If somebody doesn't want to talk, but they love mapping, I think one example someone brought up was that they had somebody who just wasn't engaged in the game, didn't seem to be having fun, and they felt like they were losing this player, right? And so they were trying to figure out, well, what can we do to get this player kind of involved? And what ended up being the thing that did it was they asked him to draw them a map. Hey, can you draw me a map of this place? And that player got super into drawing the maps. And that kind of became the thing that this player hooked them was the drawing of the maps. And they weren't talking much, they weren't doing other things, but it didn't matter. They were contributing in other ways. So let people contribute and maybe look for ways to help people contribute. You may have a player in your group, and I see this on Reddit all the time. Well, this player doesn't talk, or this player doesn't do that. And what should I do? Well, maybe they don't want to talk. But there might be something else that you can get them to do. There might be something if they're not talking and you see they're on their phone all the time. They're just totally disengaged. Well, what other things might they be able to do to keep them engaged? Maybe making them the mapper, maybe making them the quartermaster that keeps track of all the supplies and how things are, your torches are going down, all that stuff. Maybe giving them some kind of responsibility like that will engage them in a different way. It doesn't have to be, they don't have to be engaging with the experience in the way everybody else is. They may have their own manner that they want to engage in, and maybe just try to find that, right? And then access that way, and then let them be, right? If they just want to be quiet, and someone had the example that they played and on through Discord, and there was one player they just didn't like to talk. They liked to type, and they didn't force it. Hey, you want to type instead of talk? Fine, as long as you're engaged with the game, as long as you're playing with everybody and you're having fun, everything's happening. If you want to do that through typing and you don't want to talk, maybe you don't feel comfortable talking, then I'm not going to force you to talk. I'm going to let you interact with the game kind of on your own terms. They mentioned a couple games they liked for kids. One was called, I think it was called, I was trying to write this down obviously as they're talking. One was called Power Outage RPG. One was by Monty Cook, which I've heard before, and I'm going to try to find, called No Thank You Evil. There was one other one they mentioned, and I wasn't able to write it down in time. Something came up about talking to parents about kids and gaming, and this could come up also with your friends. Something someone that basically, hey, role playing games are like sports, but without the running around, right? It's like socializing sports with your imagination. And then if you're selling it to someone, they were talking about parents, but maybe if you're selling it to someone that someone else, an adult or someone that it's you're collaborative, you're telling collaborative stories using your imagination and making new friends. Like if you had to sell this to a kid, like that's kind of how you sell it to a kid's parents. Kind of that's how you talk about it. And they mentioned parents saying like, well, I wish my kids would just socialize. And the thing is, the one who was a teacher was like, yeah, have you seen sports? It's there's always something. And sports, you don't talk that much, but that's you kind of come together as a group that way. Role playing games, you're just coming at it from a different angle. Instead of running around and hitting balls and stuff, you're using your imagination and socializing that way. The Dave says there are also players that like to be the silent observer type. Some players really enjoy playing, but they want to be quiet. That doesn't mean they don't enjoy the game. Yep. And I think a lot of times GMs get kind of caught up in one particular image of how you should be enjoying the game. Well, this is how I play, so you need to play the way I play. Or if you're not playing the way I play, something must be wrong. Well, maybe nothing's wrong. Maybe this is just how they do it, and let them. Of course, follow up with them, maybe ask them, talk to them, right? But yeah, they just might have a different way of enjoying it than you do. Let's see. One I thought was interesting that I highlighted because it's something that comes up all the time, was addressing player issues in the game. So the example that came up was in one of these games, there was one player who had their character just kicking down doors all over the place, just kick down door, kick down door, kick down door, kick down door. And it was something that it was kind of becoming a bit of a nuisance. It was something that was kind of a nuisance to the party because they didn't really get a chance to strategize or do anything different because this guy was just coming in and kicking down the door, right? And but what the GM, who was this educator, what they did was they didn't say like what's wrong with you as a player, like what's like why are you doing that, right? They didn't address it like, hey, as a player, like why are you making your character kick down doors? What they did was I was really fascinating was they looked at it through the lens of the character, like the GM saying, that's interesting, why does your character kick down doors all the time? And then they even threw it out to the rest of the group, like, hey, why do you guys think, like they kind of brainstormed as a group, why do you think this character kicks down doors? Like what's up with that? And they started coming up with all kinds of reasons why this person kicked down doors. Maybe they never got to kick down doors before and now they're just addicted to kicking down doors. Maybe they did something else, right? They had all this kind of fun stuff. And so what happened was they took this player issue and they basically brought it into the game. So it no longer was an issue. It became this character's, it was like their thing. I think they said that the character's name became something like Doorsbane, and that the party would actually set up doors for them to kick down, and it became like this fun part of the game as opposed to this thing that's just making everybody angry. And I think as often as these issues come up with players in games and their behaviors, trying to look at it instead of trying to pin down the player to what they're doing, to really embrace it in the fiction, just look at it from the fictional standpoint and kind of bring everybody into it, can really kind of turn it around. I thought that was really fascinating, and I really wonder if we applied that to like the adults who have, or anybody, kids or adults that have player character behaviors that maybe we don't love. If we looked at it in that lens, maybe we can kind of break some of the stigma and stuff out of that. And of course, one of the things was that once it kind of got embraced by the group and part of it, the player wasn't doing that action anymore outside the party. They would wait for their moment, and the party would kind of help set up and like, all right, it's time to kick down the door, kick it down, right? And they'd all be cheering when then he would come up and do his thing. But it became part of the game, and so the annoying part of the part that made it sort of a detriment disappeared. Terrence says, should have had the door eat his foot. It might have been one way. It might have been one way to do it. Let's see. A couple other notes from this. Be transparent with boundaries. Not every group is for everyone, which is, I think, is a big thing. And then about those boundaries, kind of know your boundaries and know when you just need to, someone's not a fit, right? You can only force people or shove people into kind of the game you're running so much. Sometimes you just gotta say, hey, it's not a good fit. It's not a good fit, and that's it. Because the idea here is that you don't sacrifice the rest of your table to try to wedge this one player in. If this one player really just doesn't fit in there, then hey, you gotta the table at large, the group at large, is your responsibility for this one player. So sometimes that one player may just not be a fit for you. So you just need to let them know. And I thought the interesting one was that you don't control the narrative. That we talk about this all the time in different ways, how players are going to do the unexpected things. They're going to do things in things you don't know they're going to do when they're going to do it. And certainly when you're playing with kids, you kind of have to embrace the fact that the kids may go off in all kinds of tangents and do everything. And so it's a really good thing to think about, regardless of your gaming group or your age, is that, hey, you don't control the narrative. If let it go. I've said that in different videos, but I thought it was really good advice there. Just let things go. You got to kind of roll with the punches kind of thing. It was a really good talk. Copy pasta says the God of Doors bites back. Exactly. But yeah, I thought it was really good. It was, things were interesting, right? They were talking specifically about kids, which spoke to me because of my daughter, but a lot of their points about games were very much things that I think are applicable across the board. The Dave says, players not doing what you expect is the most fun part of being a GM. Yeah, it can be, but I think it also can throw people a lot of frustration who are coming at the game like we're telling my story, right? That the concept of you're running through my story, and then, oh my gosh, what happened to my story? But if you come into it, thinking like this isn't my story and it's not mine, so if they don't run into it or whatever, then it's all good, right? Then that kind of changes your perspective. That helps you out again, or it can help you out. That was that one. Let's see. Oh gosh, I'm already 45 minutes in. Terrence says creating a holy war between the god of portals and the goddess of sturdy footwear. That would work. So that was so I only got to play in um one role playing game of any stripe, and it was this one that's called The Ground Itself by Everest Pipkin. It's on drive through. I will link to the drive through later. I didn't have a chance to do it. If you've played games like not Microcosm, Microscope, like Microscope, or and there's a few of them. I think someone pointed out that this game was kind of inspired by I think it's called The Quiet Year or A Quiet Year. Kingdom. It's and I think from a sort of sandbox perspective, it's a really interesting game because it's really a game of collaboratively fleshing out a place over some set of years. It can be, and you actually roll randomly to you play through several rounds, and each round has a certain amount of gap of time in between them. But you roll randomly to see what how wide these gaps of time are. We ended up at days, so we ended up talking about a place that was going through somewhat catastrophic changes over a course of days. You might end up having centuries to play with. I think if I was going to run this kind of just as a solo player, I would. You could kind of you could probably pick the time frame that you want. It seemed like that's a fairly good system, as good as any that for fleshing out a place. If you have a place that's important to your game, and this is really specifically focused on a single location, you are sitting in this one location, you're not leaving, and you're watching how it changes through time. You're not. This is not even a micro. I mean, it's I guess a micro setting in the sense this one place is the setting, but you're not really looking at the world at large. You're not looking at. It's not like you're not working at a whole society. You're just looking at one place. So all these games are interesting, and this I think this is really the first time I've sat in on any kind of con sort of role playing game of any sort at all. Really, I think any con game. I mean, so this is my first one. I came up to the list and or the table where they had the signing up for playing games, and I looked at the games that were kind of on offer. I sort of I did want to play Call of Cthulhu. There were some D&D games. Oh, maybe I could play some D&D. There was someone who was play testing a game. I thought, well, I could sit on one of those. This one just kind of struck me. I thought it's kind of cool. I kind of like the fact that I looked at the rule book that was right there. That it's something that I could feel like that there might be some concepts in there that I could borrow from in terms of when you need to generate places and you want to be a little bit more thoughtful about it. So if you think of something like Worlds Without Number and the kind of going through the tables and kind of questions they ask, this is really kind of taking it up a notch. Certainly playing it with multiple people is interesting. I even thought, would this be something that you could play with your players? Because I think you could really, I've never done this. I'm sure people have played something like Kingdom or Microscope or some of these kind of almost setting generation games and run through it with your players. And then at the end of it, there's your setting, which I think would be a really fascinating way to start a campaign. Kind of your session 0, or maybe this is your session 0.1, 0.5, where you would go through and run through this. And then at the end of it, you have a document that has a setting. Now, the one thing is I got sick during this. I just had a terrible headache came on me, and I really couldn't function for the last bit. So my notes kind of peter out. But I got all these fine notes about the game or about the place that we created, and I didn't. Well, I guess there were a few interesting things here. I really took so the first part the first part you just kind of set the setting. Part of sort of your setup of the game is pick the setting you want. And I didn't really, I didn't want to, I guess I felt like I just wanted to take part in the game without kind of pushing it. So I didn't say, ooh, do a fantasy setting or, oh, do this. I kind of I really sort of let the other players pick what they wanted. And I was just like, yeah, that's good for me. But we ended up in a sort of fantasy realm, though it ended up having some modern elements mixed in there. We didn't, they said fantasy, didn't say fantasy medieval. So, right. So just fantasy realm, a coastal area people were Pacific Northwest inspired, an old university campus. This ends up being the thing that we're going to be talking about, the kind of grounds and campus of an old university that is secluded, but also near some mountains. So that's kind of what you do as a setup. So now we know here's the place we're dealing with, this place that we are basically locked at as this university campus and grounds that happens to be kind of Pacific Northwest. So you kind of mountains to one side, kind of coastline to other, wooded, secluded. And then there are fantasy elements, so magic and other things. Terrence says, I treat GMing like Mario Kart. I drop bananas and trap cubes in their path. The one of them finds one of those damn blue spiked turtle shells. Yeah, well, that is a danger. So then once you have the once you have the setting, then you have a timeline. And our gap was days. So you roll randomly for the gap. Dave says, Evergreen State College. My wife went there. His wife went there. I didn't know there was such a place. I'm not even sure if these players knew there was such a place, but that sounds about right in terms of just the naming. Though our name ended up being, and I left my glasses in the country. So the name of the place, which I did not participate in again, I don't know why. I mean, I didn't know anybody, but sometimes I like to just not or just kind of roll in the flow of what other people are doing. So the name we ended up with was Eleanor Weaving's University of Knowledge Keeping. So that's what we ended. So Evergreen State College would have been just as appropriate, but that's what we ended up with. So the game you're picking cards, and the cards, just playing cards. The cards correspond to questions from the book. So you use the book as becomes a reference, and it's a very slim book. The book becomes a reference for the cards. So you'll go around the table, you're flipping cards. First, you do one set with the face cards to kind of get some initial questions and answers. Then you start flipping numbered cards. Each time you get a 10, that triggers kind of an era change or a time change. We were only moving in days, so we were just jumping in time a couple of days here and there. It could be hundreds of years, and I think you can also do jump in the past. But we felt like because we were at days, it didn't make sense to jump in the past because we'd end up stepping on days we already did. It just didn't make a lot of sense. So for us, we just felt like it's not enough time. So we just kept moving forward. So the kind of stuff we got here was they'll ask you questions about all sorts of things. One of the things was, what do people wear there? And I think we just came up, well, they wear a variety of clothes. Let's see, that there are divisions within society. There's a schism between so there's this idea that the university, someone said that the university had been there forever. Terrence asks, who's Eleanor Weaving? I have no idea. That's just someone came up with that with the name of the university. No idea where it came from. I don't know if it's a reference to something. I have no clue at all. So we decided that the university kind of been there, quote unquote, forever. And that there was a schism between those who accepted that the university was essentially timeless, and then those who want answers to the questions. So there's some people who kind of just accept the it is what it is, and there are those who want to try to figure it out. And this has caused a rift between folks at the university. Why is this place here? It's for keeping and distributing knowledge. What threats are there? We decided there was storms off the coast and flooding that were threatening. This is where we got into kind of some kind of steampunkish, some modern things, that there was kind of, I don't know, machinery or sort of things that helped keep the university running, and some of those were underground, lower levels, so they were getting flooded out, and just because of their age and that they weren't in great repair to begin with, and then flooding was the flooding that was happening was threatening them further. So we had that. Let's see. So what else we have here? Oh yeah, okay, so we got those threats. So then we like religion, and then we talked about the university itself was kind of its own religion. Some people, there was this idea that it had a divine origin. Maybe it came from the sea. It turned out, I don't know, I forget what the question was for this one, but there was a giant vine in the center of the university that is actually the oldest thing in the place. And then you get these questions about the past, and then we determined that this was actually a building from another side of the planet that kind of warped here and stuck, and we decided that it was the vine, that the vine actually predates the building, and the vine was local, and then it was the vine trapped the building here, which kind of set up the sort of cataclysmic thing as people were starting to talk about that there was something going to happen with the university, and everything, this kind of flux element. And just you can see we just went through a lot of stuff. Maybe I'll write this up as something, because it was pretty interesting. Someone had mentioned that they'd played this before, or they played the Quiet Year, or they'd read about it, whatever, and that they said that always tends towards cosmic horror in the end. And we definitely started getting into cosmic horror territory as they talked about there's a big central atrium and the vine, kind of like the vine from like the James and the what is it, the giant, the beanstalk, the giant beanstalk story, and the atrium was in bad repair, and then at one point the atrium starts to crumble, and the vines cracking and splitting, and people are trying to. There's this whole like Heaven's Gate thing with some of the people, the religious people, were like gonna fly to the sky now. This was some sign for them, but then the vine falls, and there was this weird spiritual energy that was in the roots, and people were seeing their own ghostly apparition, like their own selves, kind of a ghostly apparitions inside this kind of spiritual energy. We ended up making because what you can do is you can, when you get a card, you can answer a question, but there's a couple other options you can do. One of them is to have a scene. So someone decided to have a scene at kind of a sort of a Halloween party, but it was also the storms were coming in, and they were kind of having this party, and I think my character ended up being someone I called Groundskeeper. What was this? Groundskeeper Queeb, who was spying on these people because he was one of the religious zealots, and he was kind of sent to kind of keep an eye on what these kids who might be up to no good are doing down there. The Dave asked what the name of the game is. I will link it in the description when I'm done, the Dave, but it's called The Ground Itself by Everest Pipkin. If you wait a little bit, the Dave, I will post it with a link in the show description so you can grab it from there. But if not, it's called The Ground Itself. So we did it. So you can do this thing where you can do a scene. So we did a scene, and they really just got into the role playing right away. I think one thing that was interesting is I was a lot older than everybody else playing. And my method of role playing was I was more in the third person. And I was also doing, and I don't know if it's just me on that day, but I was doing more kind of physical stuff. So for instance, there was one character that someone created who was, because they talked about how the vine would regenerate itself. So you could take basically cuttings from the vine and it would heal up and everything. And this was a student who had been taking cuttings and doing like vegan dishes out of it and eating it. So he'd been eating these cuttings from the vine that he prepared into food for the past 3 years. And that maybe he was starting to get affected by the vine or not. And that at the party, he had a cart with these different items of vine food. And so when they started role playing in this scene, they were just started talking. I mean, literally, they said like, "Okay, we're at the dinner or at this party," and then they just turned and said, "Hey, what about the storm?" And they just kind of started role playing. When they kind of prompted me, and at this point, I was kind of getting a little bit. My headache was kind of coming on a little bit, so that also didn't help with my participation. But it's interesting because I was doing more like physical stuff. I said, "Oh, Queeb is looking at you guys from the corner of his eyes," and I think at one point he got really mad at the vegan vine eater, which seemed kind of sacrilegious to him, and he lunges at the thing, but falls all across the cart and spills out the food. And I think at some point later they catch Queeb trying to taste of the vine. Couldn't resist being this close to something kind of divine to taste it. So I was doing that kind of more sort of role playing, whereas they were more in the sort of dialogue role playing. It's fascinating. At one point we took a break, and I had the I don't know where my badge is now, but I had the content creator badge, and they all had Dave's badges. So of course somebody asked me like, "Oh, like I noticed you've got this badge. Kind of what do you do?" And so I said, "Okay, this is what I do. I do about I have a channel about tabletop games, and then my focus is on kind of sandbox gaming and OSR, right? Nobody knew what OSR was. Nobody. And these are people, including the guy who knew this game, knew Microscope, knew Kingdom, knew the various bundles that this game had been included on, knew other games. They had it's not like they didn't have it's not like they didn't have idea about one particular OSR game. None of these people, and they were all younger, but at least a few of them, on the internet. These are not like the gamers that just don't know, don't know Reddit or anything, and they don't go. These are folks who are gamers, that they're online, they are active, they are searching out indie, interesting kind of small press games and playing them and engaging with them. No idea what the OSR is, and I think it just speaks to maybe the kind of bubble that we can be. I mean, the internet itself is a bubble, because I always think about this, like how many of the gamers out there don't go, even people who are not that they won't go on the internet, right? Because if you're, everybody's on the internet in some fashion these days, pretty much, but don't engage with Reddit. Like I know a lot of people who are gamers and a lot of stuff don't ever engage with Reddit, aren't really on Twitter, aren't in any of the Facebook groups. Like gaming, just they are gaming wherever they get their gaming information from, if they decide to get it all from anywhere at all, as opposed to just going to a store, they're not going on the internet to find this information, right? They're just not, which is, I think it's just fascinating in of itself. But I think there's a lot of people who just don't know or think or even go to Reddit r/OSR and look it up, or go to Facebook group, whatever. But these are folks who are in all these communities and they didn't know. But it was kind of fun as I was explaining to them about of course I was trying to push the more, what I think of the positive aspects. Hey, the open kind of gameplay, the sort of like, look, you could kind of, the sort of exploration and all these things you can do. And look, you have all this kind of freedom to kind of be in the world and like all this stuff. So I tried to kind of play it up for them. But it was really interesting to me that, none of them knew, OSR. I think they did know, or at least the one guy at least knew Mork Borg by name. I said, oh, like, like Mork Borg. And they was like, oh, Mork Borg, right? So they knew that one. And maybe if I'd thrown out some other particular titles, maybe if I'd thrown out Troika or Into the Odd, maybe they would have known those as kind of their own thing. But certainly the OSR as a concept or as a grouping, they all looked at me. First of all, I'm like, oh yeah, about OSR. And they all just kind of like empty, like, what? I thought, wow, like, that's tough. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Fluff the Griffin says, the OSR is a closed bubble. Unfortunately, the number outside our circle that have no clue is much larger than you'd expect. Yes, I agree. Dave, I was also surprised that no one knew it, but they didn't. And these were folks who I would have thought at least would have had a passing knowledge. I mean, these people who are on, they're buying some of the activist kind of, you could buy those bundles like the kind of bundles for different causes. Like they're on itch, they are on these different places, they are playing and finding and getting these kind of indie games. And yeah, the OSR as a thing was just like, what? I mean, if it had been one person or two people, but literally I was on a table with one of six and I was the only one. Everyone else was just like, I don't know what that is. So I thought that was really interesting. And it's a bummer because these are all younger people. And I know, you can get on Discord, you see lots of young people interfacing the OSR, but when you see something like that and you see these folks and they're all kind of these are all the kind of, I think the kind of people who you kind of hope would be interested in the OSR, maybe give it a shot, right? And they don't even know about it. And I don't know if they don't know because I'm not in their demographic. They probably are not seeking out videos by me on the internet or other people like me. Maybe there aren't enough people like them who are visible out there doing games. I don't know, but it was kind of an interesting, a little bit of a bummer, but kind of an interesting data point. It's just, one very, sample size of nothing. So statistically, blah, blah, blah. I don't have a leg to stand on in terms of making a cogent kind of argument. I don't have any data. I get it, but just that one little piece of one little data point was just a little bit like, huh, okay, that's sort of interesting. I got really sick with my headache. I didn't really get to finish out the game strong like I wanted to. I did make it to the end. The lady who was facilitating it, who she picked this game because she wants to get into it. Really, I thought it was really kind of canny, sort of smart choice. She picked this game to play. One, she wanted to play it. Someone gave it to her. She got it as part of the bundle, or someone gave it to her. She wanted to play it. She'd only played it once before, but just with one other person. So she wanted to play with kind of a full table, and she wants to ease herself into GMing. So she thought, I could play this game and be that kind of facilitator, sort of guiding through the game, which she did, but I don't have the full pressure of being a GM on me because I'm still also a player, but I'm kind of just, I'm sort of moderating, but maybe guiding a little bit, but I'm not in that full GM mode as a way to kind of ease into it. And I think she was really happy with her, just in terms of how it made her feel about GMing, and in terms of making her feel like, yeah, I think I can do that, like get on the next step. And I think it's a really smart choice to pick one of these kind of games if you want to sort of ease yourself into the GMing chair and you're not sure if you're going to feel, too nervous or put out or whatever. One of these games that you can take on that role of facilitator, but there's less pressure because you are just one of the players. Just maybe you are giving yourself a little bit more of a responsibility to kind of guide the group, but other than that, you're just a player. It's a way to kind of test the waters, which I thought was really good. Let's see. The Dave says there are people that went to a gamer convention and they were playing tabletop games. Make a video about 5e or Pathfinder 2 to call them in, then introduce them. I've done videos about I think the thing is that Dave, I've done interviews and I probably will do more, not interviews necessarily, but videos that are more kind of 5e centric. Haven't done them in a while. I really don't think the people cross over that much. I think the people that are into 5e tend to just be into 5e and I don't think they're much interested in the OSR type content. Now they might be interested in content that works for both. So, hex crawling videos, they can be applicable if you're running a 5th edition game. They can be applicable if you're running a, a first edition game, right? They get OSR, 5e. A lot of that stuff is not so mechanic centered that you can't cross over, but maybe you just got to catch people at the right time. I mean, the thing with this group that was maybe interesting was these aren't just 5th edition players. These aren't the people who are just like, I just want to play D&D, and for me, D&D is 5th edition. I don't care. I don't want to see. I just want my 5th edition going, right? These are people who are out there experimenting with different games. If you signed up for that game, you weren't doing it because it matched up with something that you were super into. Like it was small enough. Like I said, one person kind of was familiar with it. One person owned the game and they were running it. Everyone else was just coming into it like, this seems really interesting. I want to play it. So these are the kind of inquisitive gamers that you'd think would be more in the forefront of that knowledge, as opposed to, if you want to equate it to your sort of moviegoers, right? There's some moviegoers who just want to go see the blockbuster types. They want to go see their big tentpole movies and they don't care about anything else. That's fine. And then there are folks that want to see indie movies and these smaller movies and these kind of different movies and interesting movies, and they're kind of out searching for stuff. So for me, it was really, in a way, eye-opening to see people who are kind of in the market, who would be in the sort of target zone for at least giving OSR games a shot, at least being aware of them, even if they chose not to go see them. Like, I know I've heard of, say, mumblecore movies, even though they don't necessarily interest me, but at least I've heard the term. I kind of, okay, I know, okay, mumblecore, I get you. It's not my thing in terms of movies, styles, in terms of movements, but I get it, right? Or body horror or something. Okay, I get it. Maybe not my thing, but I get it. I know what it is. To see these people who are kind of in that, well, you should be the ones who are at least aware of it, and then not be aware. It makes you think of like, what are we doing wrong that these people who are out there looking for games, who you would seem to be without, are not know. I don't know. Maybe more folks need to put their OSR games in these different bundles if they're not already, to kind of get them a heads up. I mean, certainly I think that might be an interesting way to market your game. If you're coming out with an OSR game, maybe hop on some of these bundles, because people are picking up those bundles and finding the gems in there or looking through them to play things. Maybe you can reach people that way. But it seems like, again, one data point, straw man, blah, blah, blah. I don't have any much statistically irrelevant, all those caveats and things, because I get it. It's just, maybe I found the 5 people in the con that hadn't heard of OSRs in the tabletop space, potentially. But maybe we're not getting the word out well enough to these folks who should be who should be aware of it, and maybe even interested. Because I think when I was telling them about it, they were interested. I bet you if I had been in the mindset and been like, hey man, this is what OSR is, and if you're interested, I'm running a game of it tomorrow or whatever next session space, I bet you I could have gotten them to sign up. I think they were interested in it. I saw them kind of like going, ooh, this seems interesting. So it's not like at least the way I was outlining what OSR gaming was, that it's no interest. I think it's just more that, it hadn't penetrated their particular bubbles. Let's see. Copy Pasta said, I think it's just an indication of just how big the larger tabletop role-playing circle is. That's true too. And then Dave says they had trade wins in the Ukraine bundle for D&D last month. It's really cool. It might help get the word out. I hope it does. I mean, the one thing with those bundles, because when they said it was in one of these bundles, I thought, I think I had that bundle. But that bundle's got, 900 games in it. So it's really easy to have something in a bundle and it just totally not, I've got slush, I don't want to say slush piles. I've got piles of games that I've gotten in various bundles and things like that I know the reason. But I feel like the Dave, it'll probably help, because you'll probably reach some people who would not have seen it otherwise. And people definitely just pick up the bundles because they want to support the causes, and then they find really cool stuff in there. Anyway, it was just interesting. I'm kind of out of time. I'm trying to think if there's anything I want to wrap on before I go. Oh, I did almost forgot. In that educator, that tabletop role-playing and emotional, I forget whatever thing, the educational panel, they did mention AD&D at one point. not really in a positive way. They made a bunch of jokes about the complexities and all the yada yada yada, the crunch. But they did say that the kids that they picked it up with kids, and the kids picked it up right away. And then all the stuff that people harp on, like Thaco, the kids got within like a couple of minutes, and it wasn't a big deal. So we did get one little shout out there, but it was first like, let's make fun of AD&D for being super crunchy, but then I'll point out that the kids adapted to the point of it really wasn't calling out, say, an OSR game or a classic game like AD&D. The point was really that the kids maybe are more adaptable or more they can pick up stuff much easier than you think, which I think is true. And my experience is coming at AD&D from being a younger person, which was, yeah, absolutely. It may seem labyrinthine and whatever, but yeah, you pick it up and you get into it, and then you're just good to go. But that they did. But we did get that one mention though. There was as much joking about kind of AD&D and Thaco as there was an acknowledgement of it, but at least it got a little bit of airspace in there, because I think that was the only time in any of the either of the two things that something kind of OSR related specifically was touched upon. So yeah, other than me getting really sick with a headache, I did get to demo this game about Rome that I didn't get to talk about. Maybe I'll do another video on it and I'll just record it. I did like these figures. Folks are really cool. The thing is that I'll talk about it in something else, because I want to give them a little bit of shout out, because, well, they gave me these. I mean, they were giving these. I'm not special. They were giving these away, I think, probably to anybody who would give them a shout out on social media, but I gave them to me, which is still cool. I was one of them. And the game seemed fun, and their story was interesting. And I think it highlights the kind of positive stuff when you see Kickstarters, because they're going to take it to Kickstarter. But it's a Kickstarter that I think is kind of worth the Kickstarter. And I've ranted about that before, where I feel like sometimes just big companies that don't need kickstarting just take advantage of the structure of Kickstarter. These are folks that are using Kickstarter, I think, in the way it was intended. So hopefully it'll do really well. And the game looks cool, but I'll talk about that in a separate thing. Any question? I don't know if anyone's got any questions or anything he wants to ask me before I close this down for the day. I don't think there's anything I want to mention. I threw a lot of stuff. I mentioned it in if you checked the community tab on the channel. I did throw up some stuff on Instagram. I was just posting random pictures. A lot of it was the cosplayers. I took pictures of them. I like to take the pictures that are kind of not when they're posing. I took a lot of pictures where they're posing with other cosplayers. I don't know. I love the stuff where you have someone dressed up as some character, and I'm so out of touch. I don't know who any of these characters are, basically. Is taking pictures with another one. And I don't know. I just like those kind of behind the scenes kind of interactions more than I like asking people to take structured poses for me. So I took some of those. I was informed that this one video that I took what was a character from Fortnite called Frozen Banana, but it was just really funny because I guess it's a banana with like a boxing, like Rocky's robe on and boxing gloves, and he was walking around the food court kind of strutting, and I happened to be behind him, so I just started filming him because I loved the music and what he was doing and the fact that he was a banana. I had no idea about the Fortnite stuff. Somebody had to tell me that afterwards, but that was funny. Let's see. Terrence says, I'm not special. Terrence doesn't want to hear that kind of self-defeating attitude. Well, I appreciate that, Terrence. I merely meant that I was not unique. I think multiple people probably got these minis. But I got them. Yeah. So I'll say I'm special because I got them. They were super nice, and I really hope they do on their Kickstarter. And I'll do another video. Maybe I'll just record something instead of streaming it. I'll just record it quickly. My thoughts on that game, just because it's a nice story, and hopefully folks will get a little signal boost and do well on Kickstarter. I mean, I'm not connected to them in any way. It's just a kind of a nice story, and I feel like, hey, this is what Kickstarter should be about. So I hope they do well. I guess that's it, folks. So hopefully this wasn't too much of just me blathering on about stuff that nobody cares about. That I will get the link for, what's it called again? The Ground itself. Pretty interesting. It's slim, uses playing cards if you like playing cards. Does use some dice too for a couple of things. I think you could I think it works better with multiple people, but I think you could do it yourself. If you like Microscope, Kingdom, those kinds of games, The Quiet Year, probably will dig it. Yeah, and check your bundles. If you bought some of those humanitarian bundles on itch, you may already own The Ground itself. So check your bundles. Make sure you don't have it. Oh yeah, I got my PAX. Got my PAX t-shirts. Pretty much the only other thing I bought a game of Caesar from PSC Games. Also bought my daughter her first set of dice, which she likes, and I'm hoping we'll get to use it soon. So I'm looking forward to that. And yeah, that's about it, folks. So I'll be back tomorrow, probably on to more conventional gaming talk. I'm not sure what yet. I don't really have stuff planned far ahead. If you have suggestions, things you'd like to see me cover, talk about, whatever we can discuss, let me know. Tell me in the comments. Let me know in the community tab. Let me know on Twitter, Facebook, wherever you have to find me. Somebody sent me an email end of last week through my contact form. I'm forgetting. I think it was James Srawl. So James, if you're listening to this, I got your email. I'm not trying to shut you. I just haven't had a chance to answer yet. I will respond to you imminently. Otherwise, folks, have a great rest of your day, night, whenever you end up watching or listening to this. Game on, and I'll talk to you later. Bye, everybody.